Good afternoon, everybody. A quick snap show of hands. Who lives in a city? Quite a few of you, in fact. Okay, great. Well, you're in the right place because you'd be interested in hearing how cities are managing their water supply. How are they making sure that their water is supplied in the face of climate change and all the other challenges that are out there? My name is Anton Earl. I am the Global Coordinator for Water Systems at ICLEI. ICLEI is Local Governments for Sustainability. We're an NGO that was formed to raise the voice of local government across the three Rio conventions back in the early 1990s. So the conventions on climate change, biodiversity, and desertification. So those conventions, as you all know, are agreed to nationally, state to state, but they are implemented locally. And ironically, although they're implemented locally by local governments don't have a seat at the table. So we try to help them to raise their voice, to bring to the fore to the international community, to the policy community like this, what the challenges are that local governments face when they have to achieve urban water resilience. And it's mean that value chain of what cities have to deal with is a really long value chain. We tend to think of urban water management as something where clean water is supplied by the utility and dirty water then is released to the wastewater treatment plant, and urban water management is what happens in between. But that's not the case. We'll be hearing today about examples where local governments are actually getting very engaged with what's happening in the upper catchment, because of course that's where the security really lies. And likewise, making sure that the water that leaves their urban spaces is fit for purpose downstream, fit for the environment downstream. So that's the sort of approach that is being taken. There's also issues around what happens to that water inside the urban context. Several times when I introduce myself to mayors that are in our network, we have around 2,600 local governments that are in our network, so I engage with a lot of them, and most of them will ask me, well, what can I do to make sure my city is water secure? I mean, to paraphrase, but they'll always have some question about what are the things I need to do. And the first thing I'd ask them is, what is your level of non-revenue water? Essentially, how much of your water is going to waste, is unaccounted for. And it's actually very disconcerting how often a senior official from a city, when I ask them that question, they'll say, oh, we don't know, we don't have that data. Then okay, that city's in maybe a lot of trouble. But then very often they will have the data and they'll say, well, I'm afraid to report it's quite high. It's maybe 30% or 40%, even 50% in some cases. But at least they have the data. At least they know that there's a problem there. And of course, that is one of your simplest steps to be taken as a city in adapting to a changed climate. Make sure that the water that you do have control over, make sure you're not wasting much of that. So it's relatively simple things to be talking about, but complicated to implement these things. I think the other strand that I'd like to highlight over here, and several of our panelists today will be speaking on this, is how do you combine grey infrastructure and green infrastructure? So investments in nature-based solutions. And I always like to point out to say it's not an either-or situation. It's not to say you either have nature-based solutions or concrete-based solutions. You need both. You do need physical pipes and pumps and infrastructure like that to move water around and store it and keep it clean. But there are some really innovative examples now where you use green infrastructure to complement your grey infrastructure. So your green infrastructure can help with water purification, it can help with attenuation of flows, recharge of groundwater, all sorts of really innovative things that can be done, so long as you can get the investments flowing. And that is complicated. So something that we've started working with municipalities on globally is how do you do procurement to procure innovative approaches? So a lot of these approaches are new. Private sector partners might come up with really good ideas of how this could be done, but then they run into the barrier of municipal procurement rules. And procurement rules are there for a very good reason, to make sure that you have good spending of ratepayers' money. But it makes it very difficult for municipalities to procure for innovative approaches. So that's why partnerships are so important. You know, you can't just have a thing where a municipality decides, well, we're going to go and buy a solution off the shelf and implement it over here. You need a long-term partnership with the private sector and building that relationship and bringing that to the fore. So in this session, we'll be hearing about some of that partnership approach. How does the private sector partner with the public sector? But also a bit about how does the public sector partner with the public sector? So it's those partnerships as well. So national government talking to local government. Those partnerships are just as important as the ones with the private sector. And we need to make sure that those are working well. So before moving on, Menti polls. You've all got your phones ready. You know the routine. Could we have the Menti poll up over here? Because I've got a question that I'd like to ask, and we can see if it changes by the end of the session. It's not up there yet, but it's probably coming up really soon. So while they're bringing up the session over here, I'd also just like to say that one of the reasons why we pushed really hard to have this session at the World Water Week, and our partners IUCN and Veolia, who are co-conveners at this session, is because as of the year 2010, more than half of humanity globally lives in cities, in urban areas. Now the figure's about 60%. Africa is set to hit that level by 2030. So this is a conversation that matters. So we would be interested over here, but I can't see it up there yet, but yes, you got the question over there. Can the question also be up on the slide yet? There we are. So it's not a competition, this, but we would like to hear, are there cities that spring to mind when you think of good urban water resilience practice? What cities are getting it right? Which are there any that you think of, yes, that's a really great example? Groningen, that's an interesting one. So Singapore, yes, we've heard about that quite a bit. Glasgow, that's interesting. So there's some unexpected ones there, ones that I wasn't expecting, certainly. Windhoek, I'm glad to see they're there. Of course, they're one of the cities that do water recycling. That's really good. So this is interesting. So there's quite a range of cities out there that are doing the right thing. And it's not just 5 or 6 cities globally. This is a lot of different cities doing good things. So we don't know exactly what it is that they are doing. It could be around flood defense. It could be around non-revenue water being reduced. It could be about wastewater treatment. Okay, the next question. There's a follow-up question to this. If we can display the next question over there. So irrespective of what it is that they are doing right, what is the most important ingredient to that? What was in a word or in a short phrase, what is it that allowed them to build that relationship, that reputation essentially, for becoming an urban center that's water resilient? So that comes out quite a bit, the partnerships, PPPs, communication, people support, swimmable cities, yeah, maybe that's the key ingredient. Professionalism, I like that, get the right people to do the jobs as well. And of course, leadership. So we are very lucky over here. We do have a local government leader who I'll introduce in a little while, who will be talking to us a bit about leadership and achieving urban water security. Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to our our keynote speaker for the day. Now, our keynote speaker is joining us virtually. Our panel will be here with us, but our keynote speaker is joining us from afar. So Dr. Rebecca Peters, and I'll leave her to introduce herself briefly, will be speaking to us and joining us from the United States. So good morning, Doctor, and if I can hand it over to you, please go ahead, introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Anton and Dom, for convening us here today. As a long-standing fan of the work of ICLEI, I'm really pleased to be joining you all actually in Toronto, Canada. As Anton said, my name is Rebecca Peters. I'm a professor at Georgetown University in the School of Foreign Service, where I teach a course on water science and diplomacy. And I've also had a long career working in government, civil society, and nonprofits across more than 25 countries. But importantly, we're going to actually start with a story about my home. Let's see if my remote control click will work. If not, I may enlist Anton's help here. And it looks like I will need your help. All right, Anton. Great. So we're starting with my home in Los Angeles, California, on the west coast of the United States. And California is, by some measures, the world's fourth largest economy, a global center of innovation and technology, home to great universities, Silicon Valley, Hollywood, NASA research centers. And yet we remain fundamentally vulnerable to environmental extremes that can reshape entire cities and communities overnight. Could click next. Thank you. My personal experience is dealing with the threat and reality of environmental extremes, as shown here, the fire that burned down our family's vineyard and olive orchard. Drought, wildfire, flood, and landslides have crystallized something I grappled with for the decades of my career: the paradox of living in systems that are simultaneously incredibly sophisticated and remarkably fragile. As Anton mentioned at the beginning, we've built capacity to predict and plan and engineer our way through challenges, exemplified by some of the cities that you pointed out as having excellent water management systems. And yet the very complexity of these systems and their interconnectedness creates new forms of vulnerability that we're still learning to navigate. And that's what we're here today to talk about. Next slide, please. What happened to my community, my city, isn't unique to California or to wildfire. It's really the lived reality of rising environmental variability and vulnerability intersecting with systems that are engineered for historical climate norms, from floods in Pakistan and Texas. You click next, thank you. To droughts in Central Asia, hurricanes in the Caribbean, and heat waves in Europe. Communities and cities worldwide are confronting what engineers may call design life obsolescence, or a condition where infrastructure, institutions, and economic systems encounter conditions that exceed their design parameters. And this represents more than isolated climate impacts. It really reveals a fundamental mismatch between the temporal assumptions embedded in our physical built environment and the accelerating pace of environmental change. The 100-year flood that shaped urban drainage systems is now occurring every few decades or less. Drought cycles that informed agricultural planning are now persisting longer and intensifying more rapidly than historical records suggested might be possible. And that's what's brought us here today, is not just to discuss these challenges, but really to examine some of the assumptions built in, but also how societies can build adaptive capacity in a context where foundational assumptions that guided previous generations of planning and investment are no longer reliable guides to future conditions. Next slide, please. So today we'll examine the paradox of progress. If you keep clicking slowly as we go, it'll thank you. How the very systems that enabled human settlements and societies now present our most complex challenges. We'll begin by exploring patterns of adaptation to water insecurity across millennia, examining what these diverse responses reveal about human capacity to navigate uncertainty. We'll investigate water as a systems connector, the thread that weaves through every challenge we face. We'll trace connections from ancient settlements to contemporary urban water systems, revealing how water can illuminate the deep and often invisible interdependencies between equity, biodiversity, and climate resilience. We'll also examine the agency consensus paradox, the tension between individual action and collective responsibility when addressing problems that resist conventional solutions. And this exploration will extend beyond water management, really to help us understand how societies and cities learn to adapt to wicked problems when rising environmental pressures meet increasing systemic complexity. Thank you. Next slide, please. And our journey through these waypoints reveals a consistent pattern that the challenges that seem most intractable, whether it's water insecurity, extreme climate variability, urban inequality, are actually deeply interconnected manifestations of living in complex dynamic systems. And what we've learned from millennia of human adaptation is that resilience doesn't come from controlling uncertainty, but rather developing the capacity to work constructively within it. And this insight brings us to a fundamental truth about transformation captured by science fiction writer Octavia Butler. Writing in 1993, Butler explored how communities survive and adapt in the face of systemic breakdown, and her words speak directly to the work we're doing today. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. And the only lasting truth is change. Octavia Butler understood something essential about systems. It's inherently reciprocal. When cities implement nature-based infrastructure, they don't just change flood risk, they're changing their relationship to the watersheds they inhabit. When cities gain agency over local water systems, they don't just improve access, they're really transforming capacity for collective action. And this reciprocal transformation is why cities are powerful catalysts. Urban areas concentrate both problems and solutions. They're where abstract policies become concrete interventions and where individual innovation can scale to achieve a system-wide impact, where an integration of social, ecological, and technical approaches can deliver results across multiple domains simultaneously. Next slide, please. And if you just keep clicking, thank you. So for thousands of years, humans have faced a fundamental truth that water is both our greatest enabler and a great source of uncertainty, which encouraged me to pose these two questions to you all at the very beginning. What have we learned from a millennia of water insecurity that we can apply today? And ultimately, how does humanity respond individually and collectively to uncertainty? Civilizations that have thrived weren't those necessarily with the most water, but really those that have learned to live with water's variability. Ancient societies didn't just build irrigation, they built institutions to share uncertainty across their communities. They didn't just engineer terraces, they created social systems where individual families can contribute to collective water infrastructure. And what they understood, what we're now relearning today here in Stockholm, is that water insecurity, as we know, is not a technical problem alone. It's really a social one, a financial one, and a collective one. And the question isn't whether we'll face uncertainty, but whether we'll be able to face it together. And I'll argue that the communities that have survived and thrived are not those that transformed individual vulnerability, but really were able to translate that into collective resilience. They understand that when you touch the water system, it changes you. And when you change how you relate to water, you can change an entire society. Next slide, please. Let's start with what we think we know about water. For those in the room, a show of hands who learned this maybe in the 7th grade, like I did. This is the water cycle as most of us probably learned it: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, clean, simple, predictable. Water moves from ocean to sky to land and back again in an endless loop. And it's beautiful in simplicity to understand the basic physics of water movement and useful in that regard. But what's missing is cities, farms, people, infrastructure, borders, politics. And this pristine cycle exists in a world without us, and that's not the world that we live in. Next slide, please. This is the water world that we actually inhabit, where every drop of water falls into a maze of human systems: pipes, pumps, treatment plants, storm drains, rice fields, golf courses, suburban lawns, and industrial cooling systems. And that clean cycle we saw on the previous slide exists, but it's woven through supply chains that span continents, urban systems that concentrate millions of people, and economic flows that turn water into everything from micro trips to our morning coffee. Next slide, please. And this complexity, where every intervention creates ripple effect across systems that were never designed to work together, is what scholars call a wicked problem. You just click through a little bit, please. In planning and policy, a wicked problem is a problem that is difficult or impossible to solve because of incomplete, contradictory, and changing requirements that are often difficult to recognize. It refers to an idea or problem that cannot be fixed, where there is no single solution to the problem, whereby wicked doesn't indicate evil, but rather resistance to resolution. Another definition might be a problem whose social complexity means it has no determinable stopping point. And because of these complex interdependencies, the effort to solve one aspect of a wicked problem may reveal or create other problems. Due to their complexity, wicked problems are often characterized by organized irresponsibility. If we go to the next slide, please. And human settlements have consistently clustered around water sources, a pattern that concentrates societies along major river systems from the Nile to the Mekong. And today, approximately 2 billion people live in transboundary rivers, creating nested governance challenges, where local decisions aggregate into regional impacts that cross political jurisdictions. This spatial concentration has transformed water from an enabling resource into an archetypal wicked problem. Water challenges exhibit the characteristics that make problems wicked, as they're defined by different stakeholders, solutions in one location creating new problems elsewhere, and every intervention changing the parameters of the system itself. Consider cascading effects, for instance. Upstream dam construction doesn't simply reduce downstream flow, it can alter sediment transport, change seasonal flooding patterns, affect groundwater recharge, and shift economic and ecological relationships that riparian communities and cities depend on. And every city that expands along a riverbank doesn't just increase water demand, it's changing runoff patterns, altering nutrient loading, and creating new conditions for every city downstream. The invisible connections that water creates between seemingly separate systems have shaped human societies for millennia, but sometimes it takes a crisis to make these connections visible. Next slide, please. London in 1854 had the deadliest cholera outbreak in the city's history. Each dot represents a life lost, and each cluster holds a secret, which is that what the medical establishment saw here was random deaths from miasma, where John Snow saw evidence as an epidemiologist. This map wasn't just to track disease, but really to reveal how water connects everything, and even when we can't see the connections ourselves. Go to the next slide, please. And John Snow's breakthrough here to understand that cholera was waterborne illness wasn't just medical, it was systemic. Snow revealed that what seemed like separate, inexplicable deaths were actually one interconnected problem flowing through the city's water system. And here's what makes this a wicked problem. Solving cholera in Soho doesn't solve cholera everywhere. It revealed a deeper connection that urban sanitation, water infrastructure, poverty, and governance are connected, requiring coordinated responses across systems that had never worked together before. Next slide, please. And since 1950, we've witnessed really explosive urban growth across the world, with 750 million to over 4 billion city dwellers projected to reach 6.7 billion by 2050. And what John Snow discovered in London, that water connects everything, now applies at a nearly planetary scale. Each new city joins a web of watersheds, river basins, and water systems that cross every boundary we've created. The invisible connections that John Snow mapped in one London neighborhood now may span continents. Next slide, please. This is Kate Rayworth's donut, referred to as the safe operating space for humanity. Between social foundations that no one should fall below and ecological ceilings we cannot breach, what we've been describing here, from John Snow's cholera map to today's urban explosion, is how water challenges live simultaneously in both areas. Water scarcity pushes people below the social foundation. It's the equity crisis. And urban water systems push us beyond ecological boundaries, which is biodiversity loss and climate disruption. But here's what the donut can really reveal to us today, is that these aren't separate problems requiring separate solutions. When we build resilience through nature-based flood management, we can simultaneously advance equity through community access and biodiversity through habitat restoration. And the donut shows us why water problems are wicked and why our solutions must be integrated. Next slide, please. If you click through, please. This brings us to the agency consensus paradox. Water challenges exist at every scale simultaneously, from the household to the global level. And the tension is at the speed at which individuals can act versus the time it takes to build collective consensus means we must ask, how do we honor both individual agency and collective responsibility? How do we move fast enough to matter while building broad enough coalitions to scale and have sufficient buy-in? And research shows us something important here, which is that individual level uncertainty can trigger immediate adaptive behavior, while collective uncertainty can require a slower process of building toward consensus. Communities with strong social bonds often respond more effectively to uncertainty than those with greater material wealth, but weak social cohesion. And the most successful approaches to resilient development in cities balance individual agency with collective responsibility to give people tools to act personally while creating a framework for shared stewardship. This paradox isn't a problem to solve, but really a dynamic to manage. The most resilient cities are those that are able to have a permeable governance or systems that allow for individual innovation while building toward a collective impact. Next slide, please. And this image shows and illustrates to us how landscapes can function as integrated mosaics from intact ecosystems through shared human nature spaces to heavily modified urban areas, all contribute to overall system resilience. The corridors depicted here demonstrate what the research identifies as critical connectivity infrastructure. When urban development incorporates these natural corridors rather than fragmenting them, multiple outcomes emerge simultaneously: enhanced carbon sequestration, improved climate adaptation capacity, maintained biodiversity function, and the sustained provision of ecosystem services for urban communities. And the evidence suggests that effective responses to climate and biodiversity challenges require coordinated action across this full mosaic, from protecting remaining intact areas to transforming how cities function within the landscapes they inhabit. This systemic interconnection fundamentally reframes implementation strategy, moving from sequential sector by sector interventions to integrated approaches that leverage the very interdependencies that make these problems wicked in the first place. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? You can keep clicking, please. We've posed fundamental questions here today in service of exploring the theme, rising tides and thriving cities. What have we learned from a millennia of water insecurity that we can apply today? How does humanity respond individually and collectively to uncertainty? And ultimately, how can our efforts here at Stockholm World Water Week become part of a greater story of thriving in times of uncertainty? Historical analysis reveals that uncertainty is not the enemy of progress. It's the context within which adaptation occurs. Societies that develop resilient responses to water variability consistently demonstrate certain characteristics: the capacity for individual agency within collective frameworks, the ability to respond rapidly while building enduring institutions, and the integration of human systems with natural hydrological processes. When Stockholm implements nature-based management, it demonstrates how neighborhood-level interventions can contribute to watershed-scale resilience. If California can rebuild after fire with integrated approaches that address water security, biodiversity restoration, and community resilience simultaneously, it could demonstrate how crisis becomes an opportunity for systemic transformation. Our efforts here in Stockholm contribute to humanity's ongoing experiment in navigating uncertainty. And the question isn't whether we can solve wicked problems definitively. The question is whether we can develop the adaptive capacity to engage constructively with complexity. Next slide, please. We began with an image of transformation, a landscape forever changed by fire, a community forever changed by that landscape. This is reality we're working within, systems in constant flux, communities adapting to new conditions, and solutions that create new challenges even as they address old ones. The cities and regions represented in this room are not passive recipients of global change. You are agents of transformation. Every green infrastructure project, every city managed watershed, every cross-sector partnership changes the trajectory of urban resilience. But if you click one more time, as Octavia Butler reminds us, the act of changing these systems also changes us as professionals, as cities, as societies, learning to work within planetary boundaries. And the work ahead requires acknowledging that we cannot engineer our way to stability. Rising tides are literal, but also metaphorical. Sea level rise, climate variability, urban growth, and social complexity means that our responses don't need to be reactive. Cities that thrive are those that learn to work within change rather than against it, and build adaptive capacity rather than rigid defenses. Water connects us across watersheds, sectors, and boundaries between human and natural systems. What you change in your watersheds changes the global water story. What changes you changes your capacity to lead transformation elsewhere. The lasting truth is change, and now, today, and for the rest of this week, we have the opportunity to hear from leaders who are actively shaping that change. Today, our distinguished panelists will share the power of partnership, and we will learn how their cities are navigating these transformations and building resilience in real time. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Oh, I feel like so many new concepts that you've introduced over there, Rebecca. Thank you so much. That's really taken us through sort of a few thousand years of water history and taken us up to the present and all these changes that are going on. I'm sure there are questions from the audience, so I will take some questions. Do we have a microphone at the back there? We do indeed. All right, let's take a grouping of 3 questions, Rebecca, that we'll get over to you, and then we'll let you give a response. So I'll look all across the room. Who wants to go first? I think people are still processing all the information that came through over there. But, well, maybe while people are just waiting to form their questions, Rebecca, if I could pose one question to you, is how do we know that the actions we are taking today to respond to changes aren't going to have unintended consequences and impacts in the future, things that we couldn't have thought of? We think we're doing the right thing today, building a big new dam to ensure water security for a city or so forth, only to find that 20 or 30 years later, this is causing unintended consequences, unintended impacts. Is that an issue that we're also facing today?
Thanks, Anton. I love this question, and I think it really gets to the heart of working with wicked problems. I think there's a few approaches as a way to sort of acknowledge and work with unintended consequences rather than trying to eliminate them. I think adaptive management, systems thinking, participatory design, iterative implementation are all ways to get at these different facets of the potential knock-on consequences, whether we're able to imagine them now or not. But considering interventions that might be sort of safe to fail rather than fail safe solutions, building in improved monitoring systems to detect unintended effects early and allow for being able to iterate, and feedback loops that can allow for course correction are all things that come to mind from my experience managing programs and projects across various scales. Considering these ripple effects across a system before implementation, it can be really, really challenging to do, which is where I think participatory design becomes really critical to help identify who might be impacted both positively and negative by changes, and considering how to really integrate and include stakeholders in solution development that might help us see blind spots that may have otherwise not been apparent at the beginning.
Okay, thank you. So I like that phrase that you gave over there, safe to fail, but not necessarily fail safe. So it speaks very much to resilience, being able to bounce back, being able to work. Okay, looking out across the room, I see one hand up there. Let's take that question first. And then we'll come to you over here.
You mentioned the word, sorry. You mentioned the word obsolescence, and I think that struck me because we're used to hearing that through products, but not at scale of cities. And one of the things that came to mind was we're often working with cities that are looking at changing their water infrastructure, and they've been designed with certain values in mind. But when we become so large as cities, those values shift, and we use swimmability as an incentive for that kind of motivation. But I wonder if you might speak to some of the value shifts that are, I guess, creating this obsolescence, and maybe how you think we could reframe the way that we understand living with nature in cities so that they're not obsolete and they could have more longevity.
Matt, could you just introduce yourself and the organization you're with?
Matt from Swimmable Cities.
Thank you. And then I had another question in the front over here. Yes. With the microphone. So.
I usually don't need one. Hi, my name is Rich Irwin. I'm with Chorus Studio. I'm curious, given the various terms that you've used, have you implemented causal layered analysis in much of your work towards resolving some of the problems you've worked with?
And a third question right in the front over here, if you can pass the mic along.
Thank you very much, Dominique Etel, Veolia. Thank you for the excellent presentation, Rebecca. Really, in terms of decision, you insisted a lot on the collective construction of the solutions. I think in most geographies, if not all, I mean, we have the several levels of decision: the state level, the basin level, the city level. And of course, I mean, there's decision to be made in all these levels conjunctly. Do you have a guess of what should rest at the state level versus the two other levels? I felt in my professional career that it's often a bottleneck, the sort of repetition of the decision levels.
Great. Rebecca, you've got 3 challenging questions, certainly, and looking at different levels. So I'll let you address them in sequence.
Thank you. Well, I'll start with the value one, because I think that really gets at the heart of how we think about cities that are built around themes of, say, efficiency, control, or separation from nature are not necessarily just because they're physically failing, but also, as you pointed out, because of shifts in values. And I think some of those patterns that we've seen are around control to adaptation, efficiency to the sort of resilience movement, separation to integration, and access in varying ways to equity. I think a swimmable example is great. Cities that saw rivers as disposal systems now seem obsolete compared with communities that view rivers as recreational, ecological, or cultural assets. And I live in a city now in Washington, D.C., where it's actually illegal to swim in the rivers because they're so polluted. It would cause, risks to public health. And to speak briefly to each of those shifts, I think, controlled adaptation, cities that were designed to control water flows with channels or maximizing drainage now seem perhaps less desirable than those that are working with natural systems. I grew up in Los Angeles, as I mentioned at the beginning, and we're seeing huge shifts in how the Los Angeles River itself is managed, thanks to organizations that have advocated for decades to reimagine the Los Angeles River as a place for communities and individuals to be able to go enjoy it rather than just a concrete lined channel. And efficiency to resilience, infrastructure that's optimized for a single purpose, roads just for cars or pipes just for waste, might feel outdated when you consider, the value of multifunctional systems. And separation to integration, a sort of modernist ideal of city design that separates industrial, residential, natural areas compared with mixed use or walkable communities that are really connected to nature. And systems designed for universal access, the idea, everyone should get maybe a little bit of poor quality water, might seem less adequate than when we consider equitable outcomes where everyone maybe is able to access water based on their needs. I'm really excited to hear about the work you're doing on swimmable cities and would love to learn more. But when we consider, rather than just retrofitting old systems, I think these observations of value shifts allow us to design with natural processes from the start to identify how cities can really be partners with watersheds rather than just trying to control them. For the causal layered analysis question, CLA is a very powerful framework to understand problems at different levels. And I think that when I've seen it kind of get at the service issues, structures and relationships, ideologies and beliefs, and then sort of deeper stories, I think it's a really useful framework to be able to apply, and one that would be great to explore in another talk. And I would be excited to hear the ways that you're working on that as well. But in the interest of time, I'm going to jump ahead to Dominique's question around sort of the polycentric nature of decision making, where solutions would really benefit from coordination across scales in ways that we don't often see today. But hopefully in the years to come will be something that allows for thinking about, to your question, Dominique, which I think is really also a values question at its heart, is around like what would we consider to be scale appropriate decision making at a local level, whether that's sort of local water quality monitoring, improving community engagement and education, or site-specific restoration projects, and then getting at the sort of regional or state level where maybe there's a management issue that's crossing multiple municipal boundaries, or things like water allocation and pricing policies. Regional planning and standards, of course, I think makes sense coming from that level. And then abstracting that up at even a further level at the national, which is when it comes to resources and resource allocation, being able to generate sufficient investment for major infrastructure, we're often seeing coming from the a state level or national water quality standards. If there were a mosaic of different water quality standards at a local level, that could create some difficulty versus having that held at a national standard. And this wasn't part of your question, but I think it's really an important one given the challenges that Anton laid out at the start here is really around the role of the private sector here, and whether it's encouraging public cooperation or public-private, is considering the relative role of these sectors in innovation for technology, the role of corporate water stewardship being a big one, and also market mechanisms, whether it's green bonds or water trading. I think we've seen some really interesting frameworks come from, the Nature Conservancy comes to mind on their work on water markets, and others that I think have done a really great job of helping us see new ways to imagine how not just public and private, but also other types of organizations have a role to play here.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and I think that's a great note to end on, multi-level governance, and we're going to hear more about that. A round of applause for Rebecca. Thank you. Excellent. With that, we are privileged to hear from a local government leader. May I invite the Honourable Mayor Makusha of the city of Mbombela to the stage, please. I was speaking to the mayor as we were chatting over here before the session, and she said, well, we're one of the fastest growing cities in South Africa, and we're not all that big. We're only 800,000 people. Now imagine the complexity if it was your responsibility to make sure 800,000 people every single day had access to water. So I think that's actually a huge challenge, and we look forward to hearing more about it, Mayor. I think come up on that side, and your presentation will be up over there. And we'd like to hear a bit more about how you set about managing this very complex system. Very welcome.
Thank you very much, Anton. Good afternoon to yourself and all the colleagues, I hope. And usually in South Africa, we say officials. If you're not a leader, you become an official. So good afternoon to all of you. Well, it is, Anton, a fast-growing city, albeit we call it very small, because South Africa is quite a large country, or a big country with about 60 million, I think, citizens. So if you're about 800,000 to a million, then you still are a teeny-weeny municipality with a very small budget, if I might add. Now, you are highlighting and then also speaking, when you started speaking, inclusive of the previous speaker now, of how do we then ensure that there is urban water resistance or resilience, and the role that is played not only by us as individuals, but also collectively as a municipality. And we would then obviously just go to the first, I think the first slide, if you can quickly go there, because otherwise I will, here, there's something here.
So
Let's see.
The big button on the clicker.
Let's see what happens. Yes. So I'm gonna be doing it myself. I thought it would be like the one who's online, someone does it for me. Well, as a city of Mbombela, like many municipalities, as you can see, as we're highlighting, we do also equally have your issues of climate change, as we already know, which is caused obviously by your rising temperatures as well, your erratic rainfalls that are there, and obviously the growing urban pressures that we then experience as a city. And this challenge is actually shaping how we must then think going forward, and how we must plan and equally also be able to act around the issue of water security as a municipality. The main climate risk facing our city is an increase in temperature, which leads to hotter and drier conditions towards basically your 2050 framework or year. Over this past decade, as a city as well, we have been employing innovative water management strategies by implementing water efficiency measures, identify opportunities to diversify potable water supply, conserve available water, and also improve on groundwater recharge. We are also, as a city, committed to conserve and preserve the remaining wetlands that are there for the different ecosystem services that they provide, inclusive of biodiversity, sustainable, and flood attenuation. We are facing 3 critical challenges there, Anton, in the city. One will be the degradation of natural ecosystems that are there, aging and inadequate infrastructure that is there, and urbanization pressures and limited public awareness, as we're saying that the city is fast growing as well, and the public knowledge that is there for them and the role to play as communities in assisting and ensuring water security. So these challenges are compounded by projected climate risks, your hotter, drier conditions towards 2050, also putting further strain on already stressed water systems, as highlighted earlier on. What are we doing as a city, or the actions that we have already taken, instead of us lamenting forever, but we must be seen as government doing something to ensure that we are giving an element of security, particularly on this aspect. Well, as a city, we have proactively implemented or are implementing your climate adaptation action plan as developed by the CSIR and approved also by our own council, the politicians in that space, in June 2024. It then says at the core of everything else, you do also need the political will to be able to implement some of these things. Without the political will from the different organizations that are within council, then we won't be able to move together, which is something that we're saying that we must put people first instead of putting ourselves first as leadership. We are rehabilitating and conserving wetlands to preserve ecosystem services such as biodiversity and flood attenuation. We're investing in water efficiency as well and diversification, including your boreholes, your demand management and groundwater recharge. One of the sessions that I attended yesterday was also speaking about your natural based sources that are there. So this is what we're looking at as well as a city. We're also equally upgrading your stormwater management systems and piloting water sensitive urban design approaches to reduce flooding and improve your water reuse. With support also from the Climate Finance Gap Fund, because others were asking issues of your finances. How do you then are able to do that? We are one of the cities in the whole country. I think it's one of 2 actually who benefited from getting funding from the Climate Finance Gap Fund, which we launched the transformative river and stormwater management programs that are targeting priority catchments to restore rivers, manage stormwater sustainability, and reduce your urban pollution. Yes, is it working still? It worked there, it did not work on my laptop. But the way forward, because I'm thinking I'm using the same thing. As a way forward are the solutions that we have as a city and support, and also partnerships that Anton was also speaking on. We're saying that to build resilient as a city, particularly a small city like Mbombela, we need to invest in infrastructure upgrades to reduce water leaks and our sewer spillage and prevent contamination. We then need to improve wastewater treatment quality and capacity to reduce environmental pollution. We need to expand green infrastructure as well, such as your wetlands, riparian buffers, and green roofs as part of stormwater solutions. We also want to improve our governance and institutional capacity. To strengthen policies, regulations, and enforcement, raise also public awareness and community involvement, because resilience depends on shared responsibility. Partnerships with national departments, as you were highlighting, Anton, the role that is played by national department, and also your private public partnerships that are there, your research institutions and development finance entities are very critical. Equally, community participation must be at the heart of resilience building. As we move towards the end, as the closing remarks, I hope Anton, I stayed within the 5 minutes or 6 minutes.
1 minute left.
1 minute left. So as part of our closing remarks, I was just worried that I was going to take long, so at least I tried to keep it within. The climate change is not a distant threat. I think all of us know this. It is a present reality that all of us are facing in the world. not only in the Europe that we're in now, but Africa as well, and in the bottom part of Africa, which is your South Africa, where we come from. On the brighter side, it also presents an opportunity to transform how we manage and value water. The city of Mbombela is committed to becoming a climate resilient municipality, safeguarding water for our people, our economy, and our environment. Together, through collaboration and innovation, we can secure the future that we want. And then they put very nice Kruger National Park. You must come and visit. Thank you very much. You must come visit South Africa.
Thank you very much. That is very, very interesting to hear what Mbombela is doing, Mayor. Very impressive. I'm really impressed to hear that a lot of the things I mentioned in my introduction around green infrastructure and grey together, it sounds like Mbombela is doing. So I'm sure you're going to have some questions. You will have the opportunity to pose questions to the Mayor and to the other speakers later. Now, we spoke about partnerships earlier. And how important they are. And I'd like to invite Emmanuel Soyo of Veolia to come and speak a little bit more about what Veolia does in this rate. Please come up onto the stage and share with us what they, as a private sector partner to government, does in this space. Emmanuel, it's yours. There's the next button.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you all. So I summarized in one slide what Veolia, a company like Veolia can provide in terms of to support cities for resilience. So let's go through it, and I give you explanation on each what I mean by each title. So in terms of sustainable resources management, the first item, it's, for instance, digital solutions to monitor the production wells. And what is important here, we are developing also the so-called AI to anticipate water shortage in the few weeks and few months. So the key word I will use regularly in my presentation is anticipate what can occur in the short term and also in the long term due to climate change. The next item is water reuse. So here we just providing advanced water treatment technologies to ensure different uses from agriculture, reuse in the industry, and also in urban activity, such as street cleaning or sewer cleaning. What's behind eco factories? It's the idea that wastewater treatment plants become more than a place to treat wastewater and to release it in receiving water, but to become eco factories, for instance, to be self-sufficient in terms of energy. One very important item in terms of health and emerging pollutants for the moment is PFAS due to upcoming or present regulation around this type of pollutants with thousands of molecules, but it's quite not in the core of this session. So I skip it to the next one, drinking water network. So for instance, here we are often involved in France and abroad in social connections, and I have an example in India when after 9 years of public-private partnerships, to give you an idea, in the 3 million population served in this big city, we managed to create 400 20,000 social connections to supply drinking water to the 30% underprivileged communities. So that's an example. Wastewater flow management, what's behind that? For instance, we speak a lot about nature-based solutions. They're very nice to implement and complementary to grey infrastructure. But as grey infrastructure, I think that it's also important to operate them correctly and to ensure that they meet their nominal efficiency and in the long term. And the last item is climate change adaptations. So behind this, there are, of course, water reuse. I mentioned previously, eco factories I also mentioned. And as we face droughts, floods, there's a new service we try to provide, and I will provide examples thanks to the maybe a question if you're interested about crisis management, how to face, for instance, the consequence of storms where there's no more drinking water in the pipes. How do we ensure the continuity of the drinking water service during heavy fires, for instance? That's all for me. So here's my contact details if you want to ask questions after the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, that's really interesting. If you think of the challenges we've been speaking about and what the mayor was speaking about, the steps that Mobera is taking, and now we hear about what Emmanuel and his colleagues at Veolia are offering in response. I mean, there's a huge potential there for partnership. So I'm pretty sure we're going to get some questions on that and how you actually get those partnerships working well. In the spirit of partnerships, remember I mentioned that the PPP is not just public-private, it's public-public. So I'd like to welcome on stage Tumaini Mamwalo, who comes from the United Republic of Tanzania, the Ministry of Water. So here we're hearing from the national level, if we're looking at these different spheres. Come to the side, there's a step over there, Tumaini. And you're very welcome to the stage. You'll also see that Tumaini and I are wearing a very, very nice badge together that matches because we are both members of the Women in Water Network. So it's very nice to be on stage over here together with Tumaini. I'll hand over to you, and that's next slide.
Thank you very much. I thought you hear me. Can you make it a little bit down?
Perfect.
Okay. Good afternoon. As he said, my name is Tumaini Mwamiala. I work with Ministry of Water in Tanzania, where our big mandate is to make water supply and sanitation to cities and also to districts, and also to do water management, water sources protection management. In fact, the water supply and sanitation is under the authorities, and those authorities, they are managed, they are overseen by the ministries. So I'll make a short presentation on the case study of the Dodoma city. As most of you are aware that Tanzania government recently have shifted from Dar es Salaam city to Dodoma city, where the Dodoma city is in the center of the country, with which is very humid, and it's a semi-arid area. The rainfall distribution is like 500 to 800 millimeter per year. So it's like 4 to 3 months where it is raining, and other month is a very dry months. And also due to the shift of the government from Dar es Salaam to Dodoma, the population have increased to almost 6.4%. So you can imagine it's a huge increase of population in that town. And that also the area is, there is no rivers in that area. We only depend on groundwater. So we have the called Makutupora groundwater catchment, where that the Water Urban Authority are getting the water sources from there. So the water supply for that town is very challenging. You can see the production of water is almost 800,000 millimeter cubed per day, while the demand is 146. So you can see the difference. So most of the time there is a lot of rations of water due to the end. You know, most of people that have been shifted, they're the one who are building houses with, like everyone is building a room with a toilet and bath, while before that people are using a house having 1 or 2 toilets. So the demand of water has been increasing more and more after the shifted of the population to Dodoma. And so the urban water authorities, which are called Dodoma Water Supply and Sanitation Authority, is facing a lot of challenges on making sure that they are bringing water to the Dodoma city and also to the other neighboring cities, which is Bahi, Chamwino, and Kongwa. So the most challenges that they are facing, as I said, is they don't have much water to distribute to people, and also there is a lot of non-revenue water, and this is due to all the infrastructures and also a lot of vandalism. As you know, if people are not getting more water, they can tend to vandalize, so that they think that when doing the vandalism, they might get more water. And also, most of the communities outside the towns, they are using these community water supply centers. So if the water is not coming, they just go and vandalize. And also, as other people in that Dodoma, they are farmers. They are farmers and cattle keepers. So if they don't get water from their cattle, they just go and vandalize the systems. And also the issue of water protections on the catchments, because you can imagine it's only 4 months that people have water. So there are people who are demanding on small farms productions. So they are the one who are destroying a lot of our catchments. And those catchments, as you know, they are the one who are recharging areas for the groundwater. So those are the big challenges that these water supply and sanitation for Dodoma is getting. On issue of water resilience, the ministry is now implementing a big project which is called Dodoma Resilience and Sustainable Water Development Program. This is the program that we are thinking of. We are building a dam in the Dodoma. It's almost 100 kilometers from Dodoma town, that we are now tapping the rainwater and make a dam so that we can increase the availability of water in Dodoma town. And the water resilience project will also have the components of water catchment management, and also the distribution of the water distribution component, which will now transfer the water from those 160 kilometers to the Dodoma town. And also, we are also thinking on having a project on aquifer recharge, that we can use during rain season, we can recharge our aquifers. Though a project has a little bit discussion with communities, as you know, our African cultures, thinking of taking the dirty water and then putting the ground, and then at the end of the day, getting that water. Sometimes we are not believing in recycling of water. So we are on the process of trying to creating awareness to communities that even the water goes down, it won't be that dirty. There is that purification processes. And also we are thinking of, we are doing that water source protection to make sure that now we are taking care of all the catchments around the Makutupora aquifers, to make sure that the recharging area is getting developed more, because most of those recharging areas have been destroyed by the communities. Also on the issue of non-revenue water, we have a project with the Italians. It's called VEI. This is the project that we have put at the district metered areas, which help us to know where the linkages are, and it has helped a lot to reduce the non-revenue water, though it's still a problem because we almost have 30% of non-revenue waters in our water supply sanitation project. So this is a small presentation of which I wanted to present to you that most of cities, they're getting a lot of challenges because of climate changes, especially the cities where there is a very small, they're only, let's say, for us, the Doma, we only depend on the groundwater. We don't have surface water. So most of the time, making sure that people are getting water is very difficult. And also, you know, for us, water is a social service. So even the charges that we are charging, giving service to water to community is very low comparing to the cost of investments and infrastructure developments. So at the end of the day, you see most of these water supplies and sanitation authorities, they are they're getting a lot of challenges. They can invest on those infrastructures and everything. Maybe after 5-10 years, the infrastructure is old and they don't have money to reinvest again. So the government has to take another money to invest on it. Yeah, so those are some challenges.
Thank you.
That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think it's also really heartening to hear that you mentioned the need to protect the catchment. So even though you're planning new infrastructure, a new dam that you mentioned, that actually goes in combination with a catchment management strategy to make sure that you actually look after that dam, you don't have sedimentation and so forth going along like that. And it sets the stage perfectly for our final Ignite speaker, if I can call on Maria Lindelin from the governance program at IUCN, who will speak a bit about some of the catchment management activities that cities are doing. And the floor is yours, Maria.
Thank you. This is now in the right height. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for these really good examples. So I'm from IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and for those of you who doesn't know us, we're one of the largest and most diverse networks of membership organizations. So we have government members. We actually now also accept memberships from sub-governments, so we can have cities as members. We have NGOs, and we have experts and indigenous populations members. And we're looking at advancing NBS for sustainable development. And in urban context for us, we're looking at water not just as an utility, but as an ecosystem service that provides resilience, equity, and biodiversity help. So we have this program that's approved every so often, every 5 years, and in our Nature 2030 program, which looks forward to 2030, as part of this, we created something called, or developed something called the Urban Nature Index, which is a global framework for cities to measure and report their relationship with nature. And that can guide their planning and their investment decisions to align biodiversity, climate changes, social goals with urban performance. So this framework looks at the 6 different categories, all from the consumption drivers and the pressures, the habitat status, all the way to the governance response and the solutions. And water is actually tracked in 3 of these. So it's tracked under the consumption driver, looking at how much water does the city need now, future projections, how is it consumed, and the demand. It looks at the water pressure, so meaning the quality. What's the quality of the water coming in, coming out? What's the different type of solutions to improve quality, both for the people, for the needs in the city, but also once it leaves the city. And then it looks as responses in terms of shoreline and riverbank restoration. So these looks at these things. And to look at the visible, so it makes the visible pressures from cities more available, and then the opportunities to restore and protect these systems to then sustain them. And of course, as we've also been touching upon, and the colleagues have been talking about here, catchment conservation is never straightforward. It's context specific, depends where in the catchment you are, who's the other competitors for the same water, what other cities, what other services or needs and pressures are in the basin, are you upstream and downstream? So and cities obviously must balance the multiples and often competing demands from what the population wants and the demands for land and water and investments. And it's therefore that a good understanding of the states and the health of the catchment which serves the urban centers should be an integral part of any city's water risk assessment, so that you can ensure the continued availability and quality of the water, not only today, but also in the future. And there's obviously a difference in the cases where the catchment is within the city boundaries or just next door, which makes it much easier politically and also visibly to put funds and invest in the restoration and the protection. But sometimes these catchments that provide the water, they're further away, it goes through interbasin changes, it comes through channels, and then you also have to then still do the argumentation that the protection of these ecosystems, even though they're far away, and these catchments is still making sense for the city and for the urban, and the continued availability of water. And then, so this is where I'm coming to some of the governance frameworks that we're looking at and how we can look at this in a source to sea perspective. So water catchment restoration and urban governance in a source to sea, meaning depending on, irrelevant whether your city is a coastal city or an upstream city, it's all connected. And there's a linkage and the connectivity is there, so strategies also for cities need to be basin-wide, and there should be sharing the management goals between cities, and that's when we're coming back to what everyone is talking about, the different type of cooperation. So you have the cooperation within the cities, but then the cooperation at the global, more national stage, sometimes even transnational stage in transboundary basins, where actions in upstream can reduce sediment, nutrient loading, pollutions in downstream basins, and to ensure that you have this source to sea framework which ensures these interlinkages and the coordination with other stakeholders to embed water security into a wider system to maximize co-benefits for people, for nature, and for climate resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please do stay. Now we go into the interesting part. You get to engage with our speakers and ask them those questions that you've been thinking of. So can I ask all of our speakers to come back on stage over here, and we can take some questions from the audience. And do we have a question already? Okay, yep. Do you have the microphone? You do. We'll let everyone get settled in. Mayor, there's a spot for you over here next to Emmanuel.
Hi.
Excellent. Please just say who you are and what organization.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paula Morcillo. I'm from C40 Cities. And my question is for Ms. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. It was great to hear the ambitions from your city and to understand a little more the climate action plan. I think what you presented are very ambitious goals, and we all understand that the municipalities cannot do everything by themselves. So I would like to know if you can provide some examples of how you are trying to engage with city stakeholders like private sector to really incentivize to take some of the actions forward, like expanding like the green infrastructures and all that, because that's something that we see cities are struggling a lot with. So any learning that you can provide would be very valuable.
Okay, so we'll take a few questions. So you've got that first question to the Honourable Mayor over there about partnerships. And then there's another question here, so you can say who you are and who your question is directed to. We can hear you. We hear you fine.
Hi, my name is Shreya and I'm from an organization called Dasra in India. My question is also to the mayor in almost continuation to the previous question. In India, we see that a lot of the mayors and the local councillors at the city level don't have a lot of powers in terms of financial powers. So I wanted to understand whether in your context in Africa, there are similar challenges and how do you address some of the challenges, both in terms of devolution of powers to do work as well as the financial wherewithal to take up some initiatives at the city level. Thank you.
So as they say, of course, water flows uphill to money and power. Great. I'll take a third question to one of the other panelists. We can have the mic over here.
Thank you. My question goes to the only gentleman on the panel. Great presentation, very short but insightful. My name is Sandra. I'm coming from Lusaka, Zambia, an organization called Water Security Initiative of Zambia. I'm interested to know what motivates you as a private sector player to invest or support water security initiatives in your country.
They have a question. I hope you don't have to give away any of our commercial secrets. But, think about that one. Mayor, could I ask for you to engage with those two questions you have, and then I'll let Emmanuel do that, and then I'll also ask if my other panelists want to comment on any of these questions as well, and then we'll come back to the audience. Please, Mayor.
Thank you very much for the questions. I think the first one from the C40 cities, and thank you for being part of the people who are funding the municipality. The program that I was speaking about climate funding that is there, it's also because we're part of the C40 and we were then nominated as well to participate in that, and then we're getting that gap funding also from yourselves. So thank you very much for that. We do have, however, as part of the challenges as you're highlighting on the issues of funding, what we do or how we get funded as municipalities in South Africa, it's interdepartmental, where you get your government from national level and provincial government who will be assisting municipalities in ensuring that we implement what we need to implement, and then we are funded accordingly. There are what you call maybe perhaps your grant funding that is there, but we are looking also as a municipality and as a country at large to ensure that there is private sector funding or private public partnerships that are there so that investment gets into the institutions. We are in a process, basically, we don't incentivize as municipalities, we just go to partnerships. That is something that we should also be mindful of. But then as she was highlighting on the issues of councils themselves, not necessarily having enough financial muscle, that is where we are saying that the various state-owned enterprises or institutions are there to support the municipalities at large. So that all this, because what we do as municipalities, we will have dreams, as you're saying, that we have a lot of ambitions because the communities will forever want and want and want. So we then need to prioritize. But as we prioritize, we must then look at ensuring that whatever ideas that are there are also in a way bankable for government to be able to fund, also for other institutions like your C40s and G, I think it's GIZ as well that was coming through to the space and ensuring that money goes to the cities and private partners that will come in. I think also you are aware that we do have concessionaires also as well within the municipality to ensure that we get the funding for all the projects that we probably need. And the people in South Africa are seeing me speaking now through the internet and they are calling. I'm still busy. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, that really does demonstrate that importance of those partnerships and partners that also can contribute financial resources, but also technical resources. And maybe that's also, Emmanuel, I think the essence of the question that you received over there, you know, the long-term strategy of Veolia. Can I hand over to you?
it's not an easy question. There are many ways to answer it. I will choose to quote, if I remember correctly, our president saying that if a company is not useful, it won't survive. So what we try to do, designing this kind of services and improving them and creating new ones, is simply to be useful to our clients and to the different stakeholders of the water cycle. For instance, we develop among other. We're not the only company to do so, but we provide mobile treatment units that can be useful during wars, during catastrophe also. So, for instance, once we partner with the Red Cross to do anywhere in the world when there's a hurricane, we can also use those mobile units near our headquarters in France when there are huge fires or heavy storms in the French Riviera in 2020. Another way of being prepared to crisis is also to design hydrometeorological forecasting with a partner company specialized in it, and to be able to build a plan with our operator who knows the drinking water system and the sanitation system, and they know that if the alert reaches the level 3, then we have to shut down this pumping station because otherwise there's a risk that it would be flooded by combined sewer overflows. And by the way, we have to prepare in advance an alternative water supply for the hospital that is usually supplied by this pumping. This kind of anticipation system that we try to design and to implement with municipalities.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I think that's actually really good that you referenced that statement from your company president at the beginning, and it comes back to the true nature of the term utility. Veolia is a water utility, and you need to actually show that you have a utility value, and I think you've explained that really well. I said that the other two panelists, Maria and Tumaini, would you like to comment on any of the questions that have just been received now?
Yeah, I can comment on the question of the mayor. Mayors, you might think that they don't have money, but their voice is very important to communities. For we governments, when they're a place where the mayors are stronger like her, we really make sure that we do what communities need. So I'm sure the way I see her, she's going to get a lot of money because she's very stronger, and she can mobilize the government to make sure that she gets money to implement whatever she wants to implement in her area.
But could I follow up, Tumaini? I mean, you're from national government. So yes. How do you make sure you get the voice of mayors? Maybe not all the mayors are as strong as our mayor here from Mbombela. Maybe they're quieter, but do you have a process where you engage with local government leaders?
Yes, of course. Like when we are implementing our projects, we need the voice of the communities and knowing what they need. So we cannot go to any community without involving the mayors, because those are their areas, those people are belonging to them. So whatever we do in our projects, we have to involve their mayors from the planning stage to the implementation stage of all the projects.
Maria, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, no, I want to mention just a little bit about the funding. So obviously, how much mayors have or not have, I'm not going to go into too much details of that, but I was like coordination and coordinating across government sub-levels, different cities, different type of institutions. I mean, that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of will to do it. So I think it's it's just so particularly when you talk about source to sea governance. I mean, I think one of the key issues we always find when we talk to people about, we should do source, like we really want to implement source to sea governance. It's just this, like, how do you find the money, the time, and the everything that you need to do it? But I think there's ways of starting in the small and planning that in and setting up opportunities to create those connections and creating those partnerships also between cities and within the catchments to start planning these things at a higher level also together. And I think that's really important. So particularly for future planning and in the climate sense and when water is scarce. So it should be a priority.
Let's go back to the audience. Interesting how you'll notice when I introduce the session, I purposefully didn't speak about finance, but it's come up as a topic, which is interesting. And interesting when you talk about, well, city finances versus national finance and the partnerships needed to unlock that. I see a hand over there. Let's take a question.
Yes, thank you for the presentations. My name is Elise Lanting, and I'm working for the Regional Water Authority in the Netherlands. So we are our own government, so we have our own funding mainly, but I was interested in the public-to-public collaboration, because sometimes you also need the national government to cooperate with your plans. However, there's sometimes the case that the national government really changes in their optic because there's a change of the how do you say it? The government. They changed. So now, for instance, in the Netherlands, they're really right, how to say, because they now focusing on building more houses, and that's the main priority. So now, thinking about how to invest more money to make it more durable for the future, that's less of a problem now for them. So they're really focusing on, we just want to build a lot of housing. So I was just wondering, how would you get the water agenda more into the agenda of just building more housing and fueling the economy?
That's a great question. I can imagine. So you're saying national government changes priorities, and then you're a little bit stuck. What do? Do you follow the new one, or do you? I mean, Mayor, is that a situation you've had to face? Changes in policy at national level, and you now have to make changes at your level as well. How does that work out?
No, thank you again for the question. But I think mostly in our space, in our government, it's a very democratic process. They can't just willy-nilly change at any given time. So we have, as a municipality or as mayors, basically what happens is that we start from your ward-based, from your community, where we'll have meetings and the community will be directing government on which way to go. If the community now says they need houses, that is how it's going to go up. It's an IDP process where it goes up and up until it reaches a level where we then speak to your national government, with your provinces, which will be COCTA, which it's your cooperative governance that goes to national as well. So it then becomes integrated in that space. So you can't wake up tomorrow and have national government going left in our country. That is how it works. And as she was highlighting on your issues, if you are in a situation where the majority of the community are speaking about, as we are now with your climate change matters, all of us in the world are worried about water scarcity because of climate change. Then government will then take a route, all of us from national to local government, where we invest more in water infrastructure. As it is in the city, for instance, where I'm from, we've got perhaps I can say proposals that are there for investment issues, where we are now in a position where national government is pushing to ensure that we have a dam within the city, so we can then unlock the investment that is there, because we are now stuck about $750 million in your American dollars. That is money that must be getting into the city. It is not getting into the city because we don't have water. So that means our first priority will then be water. After water will be your road infrastructure. After that, then we must ensure that in between everything. You can't invest in a place where there's no electricity, where there's a high level of crime, where there's no water. So that is what we need to be looking at, so that when you come into the space, you are then satisfied that your money is going to work for you. And by the way, because it is public to public, as you are saying, national to province and to local government spaces, the voters that are there will then have confidence that what we want to see happening, our government is delivering at the end of the day.
Okay, so you're talking about a grounds-up process.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent. Well, with that, I'm going to call this to a close. I'm thanking all of you. Please give a big hand of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much. I get the feeling we scratched the surface with this. There's still some way to go to really understanding this interface between national government, local government, the private sector, the NGOs like IUCN doing good work there. And I'm also very heartened to hear that C40 is already helping Mbombela, so that's great. ICLEI and C40 also collaborate in many places. But I do get the sense we've just started this discussion. So we remain committed to continuing facilitating discussions like this. Certainly I've learned several things over here, some new insights. Mayor, really interesting to hear how you build up that planning process from the ground upwards. You put that really well. And at the end of the day, everything that we are discussing over here is ultimately for the benefit of the people living in these cities and making sure that they enjoy water security. So thank you all. You've been a great audience. Really nice to have engaged with all of you. And thank you for attending this session.